So this is going to be a bit of a free-for-all, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm an expert in my field. I'm an expert. I'm a Red Seal automotive technician, and I could tell you all about everything about cars, but I couldn't tell you a darn thing about farming. So
Well, we're farmers, so we're all outstanding in our field.
love it.
My next joke.
He's here all night, folks. So I wanna just open up the stage to all of you to bring this up, and I, of course, raise your hand, raise your microphone if you want to jump in. But there's been some serious issues with farmers in dealing with not only federal government but provincial governments. We saw in British Columbia some issues with water rights and the ability to pull the water out from the ground. They've been told this is for the sake of the fisheries when it's coming from aquifers. I don't understand enough about it, so I'd love to start with that topic and jump in as you feel free, because there's so many issues with farming. So I'll start with you, sir. You're from British Columbia. I'm sure you're familiar with this problem. Could you tell us about this and what's happening?
Yeah, sure. With the Water Sustainability Act that the BC ended up passing, they gave them powers to be able to actually put in these restrictions. And over the past 3 years, we've seen drought scenarios where we've actually seen farmers cut off from wells where they have rights to the water and definite need to the water. And I think it's a scenario where we put our livelihoods and stake on the line, especially when we have livestock. It's not something where we can just easily sell them and replace them. We actually, right now, it's myself. I'm not sure if the others would like to say what type of farming they're involved in, but I have my wife and I. We've got cattle, and we've had chickens, ducks, turkeys, geese. We focus on regenerative practices. I still do my own hay, and we've got our own pasture for the cattle. But we've cut back heavily because of the droughts in our region when it comes to our cattle numbers. That going back 7 years ago, I had 130 head of cattle, and then we cut back down to 50, and then I got into politics, and now we kind of cut down to my wife's, my pets. So we're sitting about 20 cows right now. But the water is a very serious issue. It affects a lot of regions differently. You've got microclimates that it can affect, and it can be very difficult dealing with the government when it comes to how they try and impose, how they try and cut off those water sources as well. And sometimes the way that they make those decisions and bring in the regulations in the first place, there isn't that consultation with the public in the first place, and especially with the farmers.
We have a similar problem. I live in Idaho, so I'm just to the south of you here. And in the West, water is gold and more valuable than gold. And our governor, his name is Governor Little, we call him Chicken Little, but he cut off the water rights to just about half of southeast Idaho, and we're one of the biggest agricultural regions in the West, so that our Department of Defense could have the water for cobalt mining. And you don't distrust your government enough, I'll just put it that way. And we don't distrust our media and our government enough. Water is life. And anything they mask in the name of, quote, sustainability is a control tactic over the people. Water is life. Do we need to be reasonable? Of course, but can the farmers do it between themselves? Yeah, they can. Can the people do it amongst themselves? Yeah, they can. But to have power and control over the basic molecule of life is really absurd. And if you're not protesting or speaking against these kind of policies, our governor reversed himself because he's Chicken Little. Thankfully he did, and the farmers won in the end. But at the end of the day, we need to stand up for each other and sustain and value life.
So what does that look like, farmers standing up for each other? I mean, when you're in the cities, or you're in an urban area, it's really easy to just assemble people at a park, things like that. But we're talking about people who live so far away from each other, and I get it. There's communities, but we're talking like entire regions you'd have to bring together.
How many people here shop at their farmer's market? Okay, this is a biased room. Great. There are two dangers in not growing up on a farm, and that is thinking that all food comes from a grocery store and all heat comes from a furnace. That's from Aldo Leopold. So join a co-op, buy a share in a farm, buy a share in a cow, shop at your farmer's market, but sustain those who sustain you, and that's not big corporate agriculture. If you go to the grocery store and you're buying things in a box, you're buying one step closer to the demise of a society.
I just want to add a little bit to that. You're also not getting the same kind of food at the grocery store than you are from your local farmer. And I'm going to give you guys a perfect example of that. So I'm a fairly new farmer. I'm married to a farmer who became a doctor so he could farm, but I have chickens. And we free range our chickens. And when you buy free range chickens at the grocery store, they're not free ranging outside. You're thinking these chickens are roaming free. They're free ranging. And I'm going to make enemies for telling you this, but it needs to be said. They're free ranging in a barn. They usually never have access to sunlight. They don't have access to bugs and grass that is outside. They're very specifically fed for production. I know this because the chickens that I got to start my chicken farms were formerly caged chickens. Some of them couldn't even jump 6 inches off the ground to go roost. They had never been outside. They won't leave the chicken coop even though we have 5 acres. I have put all of their food and water source outside just so they go outside. But if you look at the chickens that I had before, I'm going to tell you how I got into farming. I'm a millennial, and if you're a millennial and you watch any social media, you'll know that we've been, I guess, conditioned. You get 1 chicken, and it starts. You get 5 chickens, and then you see cute little sheep, and that's essentially what happened to me. My husband warned me, don't get a chicken. It's going to start. So now I have 250 layers. I have more than that, but I'm only allowed to have 299 layers, or else I have to get into a quota system, which is another one of my pet peeves. Like, I'm going to make a lot of enemies because these entities want to keep the government in power. When the government started back after Carney got in, the first thing on the agenda is the quota system.
And watch how many chickens you actually have.
Well, right now,
there was
okay.
a man arrested recently.
Yeah, so it might be my battle. I haven't decided if I'm willing to go to jail for it yet or not. I'm still under the quota system, but what happens is you can have more than 299 if they're not yet laying. So I have more than 299 now. I have some hatching this week, and I had some hatching next week. So we'll see. I might get over that, and they might come for me like they did for that guy. But I say this because to buy 1 layer quota is about $700 for 1 chicken. When you look at the cost of production, it almost creates a system like what we have right now, where all chickens are mostly caged or in a barn with never having access to the outside. Why? Well, if they have access to the outside, they have the potential of getting bird flu or something like that, which loses your entire flock, which loses your potential for making a living. But what it's creating, you're getting food that doesn't have the nutrition that it should have. You're getting chickens that's breathing in the poop and the dust that they're walking in. If you look at a backyard chicken that just roams and eats bug, and you look at that chicken and you compare it nutritionally to an egg from a free range compared to a caged egg, and Joel Salatin talks about this. If you haven't seen the movie Lunatic Farmer, watch it. It'll change your entire life. Well, it did me. But the nutritional value in that egg is not the same as what you would have. He compares like the amount of folic acid and I don't know the exact number, maybe you do.
I don't remember either.
I think it was
on his farm last
like 10 milligram is in a store-bought egg, but when you compare it to a free range, it's about 1,000 milligram. So we're not talking a little bit. So I say that. I remember posting on a post on Facebook. I have a huge following, so selling my eggs is not that hard. I'm blessed in that regards. But I remember posting on a town page, and they're like, "Oh, I get this many at Costco for like, it would have worked out to like $3.50 or $4 a dozen." But you don't get the same food that you will from like a local farmer, and not just that. You don't get the animals being treated the same way. And if we look at us, when we live in stressful environment, in traumatic environment, it affects our health. We know that. That's been proven scientifically. If you don't think that affects the animals in your food in the same way it does us human, then we're living in la la land. So and Joel stresses the importance of allowing the animal to live the life it was created to live. So like chickens, he says allowing the chickenness of the chicken.
The pigness of the pig and the
Yes.
cowness of the cow, and letting animals be what they're supposed to be.
One of the other things when you get into a quota barn system is you have an entity, the government or the egg commission or the milk commission, who is able to dictate to the farmers what they're supposed to do. And one of the things that they've been dictating in chickens, that when they are more than 7 weeks old, they have the tendency to get a disease called Merrick's. Maybe they have a tendency, but they tell us they do. And so all of these chicks are vaccinated for Merrick's right after hatch, and that's done at a hatchery. And all of these quota barns, they have such high volume in the barn that they need to ship through any of their, the egg sorters, the egg counters, and they are forcing them to get vaccinated. And these vaccines now are coming out are RNA vaccines, mRNA vaccines. And all of the hatcheries that go to people like us have been bought up by one entity. And that is where it gets vaccinated for. Same thing's happening now in pigs. Since 2018, they've been vaccinating with mRNA in the pork in the U.S. and in Canada. Shrimp, fish. What else? Several. Cattle are not yet. Sheep, the ruminants are not yet, but it's right on the verge. But the ones where they have marketing boards covering them, those ones are the first ones. They can control them.
One thing that I'd add to that too is that when you talk about the nutrition factor of the egg, that quality adds to a lot of different types of animals. When we have cattle and they're grass-fed and finished, and we always say all natural. I hate saying organic because I'm not. Our farm wasn't part of the program. But eliminating glyphosates out of the feed that goes into the animals as well, that makes a big difference. We actually had it proven that when we took our beef and we sold through the farmers markets, direct to customers, we had a lot of people that would come to us with health problems, and they'd say, yeah, we went over to Europe and we'd try some of their different things, and we didn't react. Then over here, we try all these different products, and then we have reactions. And some of them would want to do a ground beef diet. They cut everything out of their diet, and then they just did our ground beef. That was it. And they'd start getting better. And then they'd add things back into their diet one by one, and they'd start to figure out where they react. And it's amazing when you start seeing what goes into our food and you start looking at ingredients, you realize what we're being fed. And in some cases, it really isn't good. And the one thing that I'd really like to encourage people, that if you want to start to make a difference, some of the governments, like the BC government, turns around and says, buy BC. That's probably the only thing that they've actually done that's been good. They haven't actually improved infrastructure for farmers, but it is buying local. That is the biggest influence that people can do to help your farmers. or being able to turn around and say, well, what can we do to help you buy local? That when I was a kid and Trudeau Sr. came into power, we saw Cargill lobby the federal government, and that they wanted to come up into Canada, and they wanted to get into processing our cattle. Well, at that time, BC had over 300 slaughterhouses that were mom and pop operations. They employed lots of locals. They processed a lot of animals. I really hate lobbyists. Like, most of the time, they're not like small farmers. We don't get lobbied. Like, we don't have people that represent us most of the time. Most of the time, it's supply management that have the lobbyists. You see the big corporations that have the lobbyists. Cargill was successful at getting the regulations changed, so then when they came in, you saw large plants come in. A lot of the smaller plants got deregulated as the changes happened, and BC, I think, was sitting around 30 abattoirs for quite a while. It's changed a little bit more recently on the smaller end of the abattoirs. But it made a big difference on where you could send your animals, how you could get them processed locally, whether or not, as a producer myself, whether or not I could send my animals to a slaughterhouse locally and get them slaughtered, get them butchered, and then bring them back to my own local farmers market, sell the product myself. It all stays within my community. The money is spent locally within my community. Well, guess what's changed? I take my cattle or my calves to the auction mart, comes to a feedlot, goes to the slaughterhouse, over $20 billion a year goes out of Canada. One of the biggest companies in the world takes that money out of Canada. Most of their employees aren't even Canadians. They're temporary foreign workers. Sometimes globalization has hurt us so badly in different ways, and we're starting to see the effects. We're actually starting to see the controls of what it's done to us as well. And it's made it so that it's harder. That there's some regions of BC where you can't get your animals slaughtered and butchered. You have to drive for 8 hours. You have to book 6 months ahead of time just to be able to get your animals in to get them slaughtered. These are the things that we have to change going forward if we want to actually have our food systems change. The infrastructures to be able to go back to where we can actually have the systems like you're talking about. And I completely agree. And those are things that I will try my best in every way to try and push to. Because we are what we eat.
Yep. We are what we eat, and we are what we produce. And when Karl Marx said that we have to control the sources of production. And that's what they are trying to do. Here in Alberta, I think they cut back the size of a private abattoir to, I believe, don't hold me to this, but I believe it was 5,000 pounds now per year that the abattoir, the little farm-based abattoir is allowed to do. That's unproductive. You can't make a living. You can't afford the equipment to start even. And that is designed. Who are the two big packing houses here? Major companies in the world, like major you were talking about, and they are lobbying to keep this small, to keep everybody else out of the production system. And if we can't produce, we are dependent upon them. We have to keep, and that's up to you to start production. You have to become part of the parallel and start your own production. There is lots of opportunity out there for eggs, for all types of production, for vegetables, for flour and baking, and there is no depression or recession if you leave that other system behind. That other system is designed to hold you back and let the big companies succeed. It's how it's set up.
So there's an old economic phrase, and that's the first thing to be bought and sold in a regulated market is the regulator. And you're talking about lobbies. What would you see as a way out of this?
Local, decentralized, keep it local. How many people in this room are farmers? Okay, how many people in this room have a garden? Okay, you're a farmer. How many people at least have an herb or a plant in your window if you live in an apartment? You're a farmer. You're working with the dirt, and that's where it starts. Do something. You don't have to do everything, but you do have to do something. So you don't need the regulator. And I would argue you are not what you eat. You are what you ate. All life is a sponge or a straw. So what's the input into what you are eating ate? Because he brought up Roundup. How many people in this room know that Roundup was patented in 2010 by Monsanto as an antibiotic? And it destroys your gut microbiome. And now you wonder why you go to Europe. So it's great that he's feeding his cows Roundup-free grass because that bioaccumulates. And I mean, this should be a huge lawsuit, and I've got all sorts of ideas on this one in terms of labeling something antibiotic-free. But keep gardening. Keep planting something in your window. Buy a share in a local cow or a lamb or a pig or a chicken. Local, local, local. Decentralized so you don't need the regulators. Regulators regulate so that they have a job, not so that you can be healthier and your society can function better.
I want to add and give it a shout out to Calgary. So how many of you here are locally from Calgary? Okay, so did you guys know you're allowed to have backyard chickens in Calgary? So they passed legislation or city bylaws where in Calgary you can get chickens in your backyard as long as it's not a rooster. And you can get licensed. I will admit, roosters are really annoying.
That's sexist.
I
They
know.
are mean. She is right.
I have one called Richard. Short, I won't
Yeah,
say what his name
it.
is, but he's a beautiful rooster. But anyways, they don't allow rooster, but you don't need a male rooster to lay eggs. So some people don't know that. But I want to give a shout out to Calgary for doing that because that's giving people an opportunity to feed themselves. And this is a city like Calgary. So if you live in a smaller town that doesn't allow this, you can use Calgary as the example. So I would just go and look at again, in case you haven't noticed, I'm obsessed with chickens. I wish everyone had chickens.
And I don't care how he identifies, but that rooster's never laying an egg.
No, he's and I don't know if you guys watched this Charlie Kirk video where an egg can't turn into a chicken unless it has a rooster around too, so you don't need to worry about that. But some people don't know that an egg is not a fertilized egg, but unless you have Richard. But I just wanted to add to that. I'm going to say another thing about regulatory bodies. Alberta was the start of a really big fight on regulatory bodies. And some of you might be on one side versus the other, but I don't know if you remember the big wheat board battle. So I will say my husband and my father-in-law were some of the ones who went to battle. So my father-in-law is Jim Ness, one of the 13 farmers who went to jail over getting the wheat board abolished. So if you don't know, Ontario could sell their grain to whoever they wanted, but Alberta had to sell it to the government. So the government determined what the rate was and all of that. And some people will argue that we're not necessarily better off. I would argue the exact opposite now that it's abolished. But when they first started fighting the regulatory body, they weren't the majority. In fact, they were a very small minority. And this act of defiance against the wheat board led to eventually legislation being changed. And I can't remember if it was the year 1993. Somebody here might know in the crowd what year it was he was arrested. I should know. My husband was 16 years old and he was arrested. They dropped the charge because it doesn't look good to send a 16-year-old to jail over a bucket of wheat. But he was 16, and I think he's 44 now, so whatever that is. But I say this, they started against everyone, and they pushed and pushed and pushed, and it eventually led to many of them becoming elected officials and changing legislation, and then Harper abolished the wheat board. So it is possible. It's very possible. But what it needs is the public to be willing to say, we want a different type of system. Unfortunately, the only people that it affects are the wannabe farmers like me, for the quota system. The ones who have the quota want to keep it because it stifles competition. But stifling competition also affects the cost of your food. So it does affect you. You just don't know it does. So if you want to start seeing change, better food, better quality food, you have to be louder than those lobbyists and those organizations. And I'm going to say one last thing, and this is probably the biggest thing. You want to know why we're in a tariff war, why Trump is so pissed off? He keeps mentioning the dairy and egg quota system. So some of you don't know, the first thing they did when Mark Carney got started government is to pass legislation to protect the quota system, whether it's dairy or egg. So right now, we're facing industries closing, facing huge tariffs because the federal government won't bend on this at all. So it is affecting you in so many ways that you don't even know.
That's right. That's right. That was Bill S-202 or 201, I believe. Codified it into law that they cannot even use it as a negotiation tool. They can't. It's not allowed. So we're pressed for time. So I do want to give everyone a final word on this, and you can add to this and then bring that in as your final word.
I just wanted to add, it's deregulation we need, period.
Period.
In a major way. We need people to speak up. We need people to fight. Like I said previously, we need people to step up and start representing. If you want a difference, you need to make it happen. Right now, you look at the cost. When it comes to price difference in my area, you go to the store, price of eggs is the same price as if you go and buy it directly off of a farmer. Better product off of a farmer.
Yep.
Every time I go and choose that other way. Supply management, the only thing that is doing is putting money in big corporations' pockets and allowing commercial farms to gobble up more land across the country and keep on growing bigger. And what you don't understand is that small farms are shrinking and going out of business across the country at a record pace. I think Stats Canada showed it. I think each time they do it in a 4-year term. For the past 2 times, they showed 10% of small farms have disappeared. Commercial farms are gobbling them up. Once they become commercial and they go into that landmass, they will never go back to a small farmer. Meaning this system, if we want to get it back, it will become even harder to get it back. The other thing that I have to say as well, when it comes to tariffs, we've heard a little bit of talk about tariffs. Do people know what tariffs really do?
They tax Canadians.
That's all.
Counter tariffs, yeah.
All tariffs do is make the life of us peasants harder. It's not the rich that end up paying into them, really. It's not the corporations that really pay into them. It's always the people at the bottom that pay the price. So every tariff that gets put in place, we're the ones paying the prices. If they actually took every single one of those tariffs off, it would be amazing. I would love to see the ripple effects of how much all of our goods would drop in price. And the one thing that I'll close out on, and this is one thing that I've talked about quite a bit in the past that I've tried to help, and this relates to supply management. I won't get into it too much. But Drea mentioned the ostrich farm. You know, I got Kealy to come to the BC legislature during question period and to speak to the Minister of Agriculture directly. Because what they're going through, it's not a regular quarantine for something that if they get rid of the animals, it's going to be isolated and it disappears. The avian flu, what they're saying, the way that it's being transmitted, and it's traveling by wild birds. It's going to the U.S. It's going all over. They can't stop it. The U.S. has admitted that they can't stop it. They're dealing with it. What's happening with these birds, it sounds like tomorrow they're going to go and kill every single one of these ostriches. Now, like my cattle, that they're not easy to replace. They're not like just these chicken barns where they go in and kill the whole barn and they'll have the barn replaced again in 6 months. These animals aren't easily replaced. The ostriches are loved. They're not just an asset to be sold. I can't imagine what they're going to go through. I really hope that Drea is going to go there and cover it. I really hope that if you see it, that you let people know that this government doesn't need to rule with an iron fist, that they can do things differently. The federal government and the CFIA can change their policies and make it so that we can actually move forward. What's absolutely crazy is that these birds got the avian flu. Some of them died, yes. But they're putting out eggs right now that have antibodies in them, and they can use those antibodies and harvest them to help create solutions going forward to stop other animals or people from dying and getting that same virus. Now, it makes you wonder, who might not want something like that around? I guess we probably won't go down that rabbit hole, but I'm sure.
How long have you got?
Yeah. But there's other solutions going forward, and these are the things that it's like when I say I'm not going to get whipped, that I'm not backing down from fights like these, but I need backup. We need help. So where I'm going forward is that right now this government doesn't give a shit about farmers. They made it clear. Canola tariffs. Oh yeah, we're going to get EV tariffs. Instead, farmers in my region don't know where their canola is going to go. Or they're going to end up taking a giant price hit on something that's their livelihood. This government doesn't care. We need to change the system. It has to change with us. How it changes, I don't have the answers. But we can find them. We work together. And we can unify.
John, last word.
What do you pay for a loaf of bread? Has it gone down substantially lately? No? Wheat has. We're like almost down to half price on wheat compared to some of the peaks that we've seen a couple of years ago. There's a problem out there with this control and the centralization, the federation of our food systems. And we have to change that. We have to take back control by the people. We have to break the regulatory juggernaut that is holding us, these quotas systems that are making it so that the big companies can do it, can hold us in place. But it takes people to actually make the choice to buy outside the regular system. We have farmers and we have people who are willing to step up and produce. But it's too easy just to go to the store and buy a dozen eggs and a gallon of homogenized milk and cooked milk. It's too easy. We need help in people stepping up and taking that section over. Be a consumer for us.
Thank you. Nadine.
I don't have a lot more to say, but while we've been talking, I had an idea. And maybe it's the worst idea in the world, so don't get angry at me if it is. But we're going against these massive entities that have so much influence and power, lobbyists, and they're all run by big corporation. So what if we created an even bigger entity that is run by just you, the everyday people, or the backyard farmers who can lobby I guess, locally, or teach people how to do it themselves. I don't know. I think that would be, because we saw that in media, right? Mainstream media is such this massive operation. It's hard to counter that. But if you're thinking about a different parallel system, like a union for the people, but
Well, the Dutch did. The Dutch did. They made the
did.
Farmers' Party, and that became largely popular.
maybe we should. Well, okay, I don't think new political parties is always the answer, because the conservatives always go there, right? Right. Anytime there's a problem, let's start a new party. What if we created just an organization that fights, not for the entities, but just for the people it affects? I don't know.
That's
just
what
an
government's supposed to do.
idea. I know, right? Okay, it's a bad idea.
That idea, though, is the parallel.
Yeah.
When we talk about the Prairie Development Association and the parallel economy, that's what is already out there, but it needs you to buy in.
Final thoughts.
Final thoughts?
Eat real food, not food-like substances. Vote with your pocketbook, support your local farmer. Engage in small acts of non-compliance. And I'm an orchardist, and I would suggest everybody grow a pair.
I want to thank the panel this evening for everything that you've said and shed a lot of light for someone like myself. I know nothing about farming, and I'm absolutely interested in it. I like doing gardening, so I guess I'm in spirit, at least. I'm terrible at it, but I'm trying, and it's a great thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, put it up for the panel. Thank you all.